You know, I want to be more active on here. I don't know if it's motivation, lack of energy, not sure what topic they'll land on, or a combination of those things that just kind of makes wanting to make a video kind of a hard thing to do. And that really bugs me because I think there's a lot of stuff out there that's worth talking about. There's the fact that Netflix has created a massive amount of shows that don't get proper attention. There's HBO's adaptation of The Last of Us, helmed by one half of the rotten meat computer responsible for...
Hi. Hey. I actually cleared you for active duty.
Barely.
You could probably get a stay if you ask.
I'd rather not sit around if I don't have to.
No one's okay with this?
Why would it be up to Owen?
Well, that. Thanks, Neil. I could talk about Mindy Kaling's affront to Joe Ruby, Ken Spears, and God himself in the form of Velma. Especially on the topic of meta humor and the laziness that surrounds that. But I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, I know, it's easy to complain, and there's some hot and button issues that need to be talked about right now. And this being so small of a channel, I should really play the algorithm to my advantage and try and get those sweet, sweet clicks like I did with the Supergirl video, even though both of those were kind of one-offs, and try and get some traffic to this little channel as best I can. But since this is just a small channel and I only kind of do this as a hobby sometimes, I don't gotta worry about any of that. So instead of talking about something I hate, I'm going to talk about something I love. I might still talk about some things I hate, though, so fair warning, I can't get away with it entirely. Because I want to talk about The Dragon Prince, or as it's been called since Season 4, The Dragon Prince Mystery of Erebos. This is not a show that I was anticipating on watching ever. I vaguely remember when this show first hit Netflix and thinking to myself, stupidly, I might add, something along the lines of, oh great, another kids show that's gonna pollute Netflix's servers that probably stinks. And that was the end of that for a couple years now. I don't know if it was the fact that it's a kids show first and foremost that gave me a low opinion of it. I don't know if it's because it's a Netflix original and there's already so freaking many Netflix originals out there that don't get proper attention that you never know where to jump onto to watch one of these damn things. But I didn't think anything of it for years. That was until a little over a month ago, I saw the trailer for it because the new season had premiered, and I recognized a very familiar voice.
Callum, you know it doesn't help to yell. And why are you saying human troops like that?
What do you mean? That's how I always say, heavily armed human troops.
Aang, this is my friend Fufu Cuddly Poops, Aang.
Yep, it's Jack DeSena, aka Sokka the Water Tribe, aka he's just like me.
Oh, he just like me. He just like me for real.
I want to just punch myself in the nose for making that joke, but I had to.
Water Tribe.
Who, by the way, before I get too much deeper into this, he actually kind of has some range as a voice actor. Not necessarily that he's changing his voice a lot or anything like that, he's not Mel Blanc, but it's very nice that I can not see them, and I can absolutely hear the differences in how their characters are portrayed. I think that's really cool. Good for you, Jack. That's awesome. In fact, speaking of Sokka, one of the creators of this show and one of the head writers is none other than Ernie Haas. But Dan, you say as you look at me like I'm a schizophrenic for actually acting like you should know something stupid like this. Who is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. But first, quick story synopsis, and then we'll get into that. The Dragon Prince is a fantasy show set in the middle of a conflict between the collection of human kingdoms and the elves of the land of Zadia. Our protagonists are Callum and his brother Ezrin, who are princes of Katalis, and a Moonshadow elf assassin named Rayla. Together, the three aim to find a way of bringing peace between the humans and the elves, and end the war between the two races. If that sounds like a bit of a broad-stroked explanation of the story, it's because it is. Like The Last Airbender, this has a lot going on outside of the main plot that if I were to explain it to you just right here, I would be doing a disservice to you as the viewer. Because I can't explain it very well, and the show does it so naturally and with such fluidity that it's much better if you just watch it. So that's a cop-out on my end, but you get the main part of the plot. Here you go. In fact, let's talk a little bit more about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that thing I was saying earlier about Aaron Ehas. The reason I titled this video The True Sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender is because I actually really mean that sincerely. Not because I hate The Legend of Korra to the point that I wouldn't mag dump into it if it was trash on my local gun range, though that's a good point too because Korra does in fact suck, but because Aaron Ehas was directly involved in both Avatar: The Last Airbender and this show. I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now. Other people besides me with bigger channels and followings have said it too, probably. But if Ehas was not attached to The Last Airbender, it would have been a lesser show. Not only did he directly write himself such episodes as The Winter Solstice Part 1, The Siege of the North Part 2, and The Storm, aka episodes considered among the best in the series! But he was the head writer of the entire series. Sure, Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, I'm sure I mispronounced that, are credited as creating the show, but Ehas is the main reason that show is good. Michael and Brian are the boat. Aaron Ehas is the rudder. Without him, it's gonna go crazy. The theme of balance between those two and the theme of balance within The Last Airbender really comes into play once you start talking about what made that show great. Don't believe me? Without Aaron Ehas, we get The Legend of Korra. And I'll back that up by saying that Korra, at no point, at least not that I'm aware, had no involvement from Aaron Ehas. And if it did, it was very slight and tangential, and he was not attached to anything that I could see. It doesn't show up on his IMDb, so I'm gonna say he wasn't there at all. You want to know more about that? I would suggest you go look up someone like ER, because he can be more schizo and autistic about this than I can. But unlike Korra, and exactly like Avatar, the Dragon Prince does a lot of the same stuff. Both series structure their seasons like books, with each book being based off a respective element, or primal source of magic, per season. Both are set in a very well thought out fantasy world with tight rules and logic. Both have extremely fleshed out characters, not just for the protagonists, but all involved, even the main villains. The protagonists themselves are children on a journey around the world, to save the world no less. And I think the most important aspect of this all is that the show acknowledges death and the consequences that come from bad decision making and horrific mistakes and accidents. And though our protagonists are children, they are still mature enough to acknowledge these consequences and mistakes and say, oh my god, this is really bad. Ask yourself this: how many times in The Last Airbender is the concept of death, not just necessarily as a consequence of actions, but as an immutable fact of life, brought up in the show? It's all the time. Each season, I don't know how many times death is mentioned. And that's a kids show, or traditionally thought of as a kids show. It's for adults too, let's be real here. It's an all ages family show. And now ask yourself this: how many times did something like The Legend of Korra treat the characters as if they're smart? Is it consistent with previously established lore? Do the characters make sense? Does it treat people watching it like adults, whether they are or not? Or is it a crappy CW drama that's really nicely animated and set in the same world as the series that preceded it? And before anyone tries to bring up the comics, know that I really like those as well, even if they don't have Ehas attached to them. But in the same vein of things, I'm not attaching anything of extreme importance and goodness to Brian and Michael. I'm giving all the credit to Gene Yang. I don't know how much he wrote, I don't know how much they wrote, just tossing it out there. So Ehas really is the driving force here, is what I'm trying to say. I really hate Korra, by the way. I don't want to do a video on it, but I feel like I will in the future, just to add to the screaming. Now, I know I'm not a huge channel, but someone, hi mom, might get angry at anything approaching woke territory, or whatever you want to call it, especially in a kids show. So I talk about a few moments where it might dip into that territory. And I do mean moments. Without getting too heavy into spoilers, there's a couple little snippets here and there in the show where there are same-sex couples. However, this is the big caveat here. Unlike a lot of shows where being gay or lesbian or trans or whatever is the pretty much only defining characteristic of a certain character, you know who I'm talking about, probably. This is a good example of where it actually serves to drive the plot, but not because of the romance aspect. More because, getting into that slight spoiler here, it's a union between an elf and a human, and because they do get married, and they are a canon couple, there are consequences of culture clash between humans and elves, and it's a whole thing, but it's discussed at least a little bit because world-building reasons, not necessarily romantic reasons in this case. Beyond that, there's maybe one or two instances where a same-sex couple shares a kiss and it's done in like 5 seconds, and it's one of those things you could just as easily have edited out. Even the thing about world building and the union between the two species, which feels weird to say, can be brought down to something like, you know, oh hey, we just brought peace down, there's no marriage, but whatever. It's something that could easily be fixed or changed in like 5 minutes of time in the writing room, and you wouldn't even realize it's there, really. It's a kind of blink and you'll miss it thing for the most part. Also, there is a trans character. Just want to put that out there right now. I didn't even actually realize it's a trans person until after the fact. I went and looked up a bunch of stuff because I was curious. Found out I didn't even realize because maybe I'm just kind of obtuse. But the character is still handled very well. It's not their sole defining aspect. It's all the same stuff I've said here so far. But if for some reason you don't want to expose your kid to that, I get it. But just know, if me being a grown-ass, almost 30-year-old man didn't pick up on it immediately, the kid probably won't either. Just saying, but editing Dan out. Which, can I just say that's a breath of fresh air to have a character that's actually kind of canonically gay or lesbian, and it's just accepted and they just move on. There's no pontificating about, oh, oppression this, oh, fear for my life that. It's just like, yeah, okay, they kiss, they're gay, move on. We got dragons and stuff to deal with right now. I don't care about who you go to bed with, bro. I can understand why parents would probably not want to show that to their kids, so I'm not going to demonize anybody on either side for that one, because, hey, that makes sense to me. But just know that there's at least that caveat. It's not so in your face to be a family-friendly drag show. No, I will not elaborate any further on that. No, I will not show it. Cora's enough cancer for this video. Eat me. I would say, if you are a fan of the greater fantasy genre, I don't know if I'd call this swords and sorcery, but whatever, there's swords and there's some sorcery going on, so maybe that's the best description. And especially if you're a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, you should absolutely watch this show. It's fun, it's clever, it's well put together, it's very well thought out and built. The cast does a great job and they're extremely dynamic. And again, I cannot stress this enough, most importantly to me, this is a show that treats children like adults, which is ultimately, I think, what you want out of a kid's show. Because hey, a 7 or 8-year-old is gonna grow up to be a 20 or 30-year-old eventually, and you want them to have a show that actually treats them intelligently. There's a reason why something like Star Wars, for instance, is something that you can always watch with a family. Whether that's a little kid, or it's a teenage kid, or a grown kid and a old, frizzled-looking old man, or parents, or whatever. Because it treats everyone involved like they can handle tough concepts. And that's probably the best thing about this show, and The Last Airbender, in the end. With that, I'm Dan the Movie Man. Have a good day.